Welcome to Dashboarding Best Practices, the first session in our new Applitools in Action webinar series. I'm Pam Morgan, and I will be the session host. I'm joined today by my colleague, Edward Evangelista, the Director of North American Customer Success here at Applitools. With nearly a decade of experience training teams to use Applitools Eyes, EJ has helped various organizations smoothly integrate visual validation techniques into their UI testing, improving software quality and release efficiency. You're in for a treat today.
Thank you for everyone for attending today's session. And as Pam mentioned, we'll be going over advanced dashboards in Applitools Eyes. And this session is going to be really great for honestly anyone that's new to Applitools that hasn't used it before. We'll go through some basic principles and concepts of using the Applitools dashboard. And also for users who already use Applitools and want to learn more efficient ways how to use the dashboard. So I hope to teach for the users who already have Applitools in their workflow, maybe a couple tips and tricks that maybe you haven't seen before or might just need a refresher on. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll go into the Applitools dashboard. And I'd like to just quickly note that everything that I'm showing today is post-execution of the test. So for a new user of Applitools, if you're unfamiliar with the workflow, Applitools is meant to be integrated into your functional test workflow. So you add the Applitools SDK to the functional tests, whether in whatever framework, Selenium, Cypress, Playwright as the popular options. You add Applitools assertions to those tests. The test runs, those assertions take the screenshots, and your functional test provides a functional result, pass, fail. But also now your Applitools assertions are analyzed and presented into the Applitools dashboard that I'm about to show on my screen. Give me 1 second to share. And this is the Applitools Eyes test results dashboard. And we're going to first go through a quick overview of how to operate the test results dashboard. And then we're also going to move into how to manage these test results most effectively. So that's going to be really great for current users of Eyes. Hope to show you a couple tips and tricks. And also we'll go into how to find specific test data or look at tests or baselines that need the most attention. So we'll also learn how to look at other dashboards in Applitools Eyes. If it's a surprise to anyone, this is not the only dashboard you have as part of Applitools. This is the default dashboard, the test results dashboard, which is where, again, your results as part of that functional test, as the functional UI test, are analyzed and posted in Applitools. So a lot of the work and maintenance of Applitools goes into this dashboard. But all the data that Applitools is consuming as part of this dashboard is also filtered through these other dashboards: tests requiring attention, apps and tests, insights. We'll go through that in a few minutes here. But just a quick overview of the test results dashboard. Again, the most heavily used portion of Applitools Eyes. This is what we call the batch filter view. So you can see as I'm scrolling down here, this on the left-hand side is basically an infinity load. This is going to display all the history of execution of your specific dashboard. So it's, as you can see, I only have 45 45 batch results in here, all dating all the way back to 2019. So it's just, if you're already a user of Applitools, this is just going to display every time you execute a test or batch. A batch is just a folder of tests. Consider that. So you can see here, we're looking at this one batch called Cypress 10 in JavaScript with the ultra-fast grid, kind of a long name, but it has 5 results in here, 5 test results. So your batches can contain a lot of tests or just one test. We'll also go into the hierarchy of why batching is important is it also contributes to the AI auto maintenance capability of this dashboard. And we'll show a few examples of why that's very important for efficiency. So again, the batch details view is just infinitely loading here. But also want to call out a pretty important concept for new users of Applitools looking at this batch again that has, as you can see, 5 tests. We'll get into the test result status in a second, but want to call out these columns. You can see here we have displayed the main contributors: app name, test name, viewport size, browser, and operating system. And why I'm calling out these 5 main dimensions of what's displayed in these columns here is how Applitools organizes the data or image data you send it, right? You're executing the test. You ultimately have the operation or the capability of defining what your test name is, what your app name is, right? In this example, I ran a demo test of the Apney Bank app, and I'm going to click into this one, the Chrome 104 test. And you can see I ran a 2-step test here called step 1 login page, and then step 2 main page. And I can actually click into here, and that's going to pull up my step, my before screenshot, and my checkpoint image. And I can also play back these steps. So as we just saw, there's a 2-step. This test was two validations captured. I can play back that click path here and just see that in action. So if I have a test that has multiple validations as part of my functional flow, they'll be displayed here. I can have unlimited number of steps in my test. I would say the longer your steps, your test is, I would argue, okay, is that going against ultimately end-to-end happy path, or your user flows matching what you're putting into Applitools? So normally end-to-end tests, we want to be consistently to user flow, and they're short and sweet, right? Essentially, as much as possible for automation purposes. But this is important because Applitools is, again, defining your baselines by those 5 different parameters. So if you change the app name, the test name, the size of the viewports, the browser, or the OS, Applitools will automatically organize that image as a new baseline. So you can see here why we have 5 results posted for the same test is because we have different environments. We have the Chrome browser environment, Firefox, Safari, and actually 3 different sizes of Chrome here. We have an Android Nexus view, a tablet view, Nexus, a desktop view, and a device, a Pixel 2. And furthermore, I can also view this information in different ways. So I can filter and group at either the individual batch layer or also the whole list of batch layer. But we're going to do this individual batch here first. If I wanted to group by test name, I can go to group settings. I can sort by test name here. I can include it to the active groups. And therefore, I just created a group. We only have one test case, one test name in this one batch. That's why we only have one grouping here. But I can even also further group this by device. I could say, okay, I want to add device grouping here. And out of this 5 tests, I just created 3 different groups, and I can easily look at those test results by that grouping I just made. So you can see here how I can get very granular to what I care about as I'm looking at the test results and managing them, maintaining them. If I just care about, if I'm a iOS engineer or Android engineer, I just care about the mobile results. I don't care about desktop, right? I can just ignore that and just focus on the device views. Similarly, instead of grouping all of it, I can filter. So here I have a filter test results option, and I can either filter by text. I can just put in, hey, I want to care about the step name of the login page. But also, I want to look at, actually, let me pick a different example here. We're going to go to this one batch where it has unresolved test status, and we'll get into what unresolved means here in a second. But let's say I want to filter just for the unresolved test types. So I can go to test status and click unresolved. Click apply. And it's now just going to filter in this view. And keep in mind, the filters that I add here will live here until I remove them. So this is important to remember if you're sharing this dashboard with other team members, they'll be able to see these views. So it's also very helpful if unresolved is what you ultimately care about. I don't want to see the passing tests, because passing means I don't need to take action. We can just keep the unresolved filter on, and therefore I'll just be displayed the ones that need the tests that need my attention. Similarly, we have, as you can see, the unresolved test status. And in this example, we have the full test displayed, where I have a two-step test again. And the step 1 of this test has differences. Step 2 passed the validation. So it's actually not showing just the steps that need attention, but we also have an additional filter here for that case. So I can also say step status. I just want to see the steps that are unresolved. I don't care about the steps that are passed. So in that same test, now I just see step 1. The step 1 had the differencing here. And going into what the test status means, we're going to go to 2 different examples, because in my example, we have an unresolved in one batch, and we're going to start with a new test here. So you can see here in my example of ESPN Plus test flow that I ran, we can see that it's obviously denoted as a test status new, which means Applitools actually has never seen this image before. This is the first time we're running this test to Applitools' knowledge. So if we jump in here, it has no previous history of this test. Therefore, in the side-by-side view, it says no baseline image, and it's denoted by this plus signal, new. So therefore, it's automatically passed. And it's important the first time you run Applitools to denote this as, okay, I upload my test the first time, it's going to be denoted as new. Is it the right version, right? Does the baseline that I'm defining look correct? It's automatically defined for me as new, therefore passed. And then every subsequent test run will be compared to that last version, right? So in a test where we have an existing baseline that's not new, go here, passed, back to the Acme Bank example. In this test of the Chrome 800 by 600 example, I have an existing baseline, and now Applitools is saying passed. That means there's a match. Therefore, the previous version matches my last checkpoint. There's no differences to call out or take action on. Therefore, this is a passing test. There's no differences in my last to my last version. That's what passing means. Unresolved means there was a difference found. And we're going to go to this example, pixel by pixel. And we're going to look at step 1. As we just mentioned, step 2 had no differences. We're going to look at step 1. We're going to go into this open test editor view, just to see this a little better in full screen. And unresolved, denoted by the equal sign strike through as a mismatch, means, hey, Applitools found differences in its AI vision. You can see here that it's calling out correctly that all the differences denoted on the screen. And therefore, it's up to whoever is maintaining this test result to approve or reject these differences. And essentially this means that this is the maintenance portion of using Applitools. It is up to, again, your team structure. If this is, let's say the automation engineer kicks off the tests, and now it's up to a separate person, a QA engineer, to therefore accept these changes. Or if you're in a shift left workflow where you, as the developer, are kicking off and then maintaining this test result, you need to approve this or reject this test, therefore to commit your PR, right, as part of your pull request, commit your build. This is where you would take action in the pass fail scenario. So give me 1 second. Just want to show you that a little better. Let me pick a different example here, where let's say we have this one difference, and therefore this, in the before version, the download app button was apparent, and now it's missing in my new version. And let's say I wanted to fail that scenario where that looks like clearly a bug to me. I would click this thumbs down functionality. And now it's going to move me to the second step of this test, but we're just going to operate on the first one. So moving back out to the batch view, you can see here in this action we took, we rejected this test result in step 1, saying this is a bug, and we want to fail this test. We don't want to accept that change. If we passed it, we can move it to passed. Therefore, we're saying we're passing this test. Therefore, it's still saying it's, previously at the execution result, it was a mismatch, and now we're passing it. We're accepting this version as the new result. Therefore, when we pass a test, it will become our new baseline going forward once we save it, right? We have to save our changes. In a future version of Applitools, this will become an autosave functionality, so therefore we don't need to click this button, but right now we do if we make any change to the thumbs up, thumbs down functionality of the baseline. So if I pass this, the next subsequent run will be this version on my right-hand side, will then become my baseline. And let us know in the chat if you have any questions about that workflow functionality. But that is the main concept of keeping baselines or maintaining baselines accurately in Applitools. This thumbs up, thumbs down functionality, and only needs to be done when Applitools finds differences. We're going to go ahead and go back to that. Additionally, there are different views of this data, as I mentioned at the top of the session. If I want to look at this batch just by metrics perspective, we're looking at the batch details view. So we have all the views of the test. Something else to also importantly call out here. This table we see here, when I mentioned the columns, this can be customizable. In this one little button here on the right-hand side, this customize table option, you can change these columns. You can pin certain columns to the left-hand side. For example, if I want to see who ran this test, I can click this on and I can pin it to the top. And I can also drag it to my left-hand side. You can see it was run by me, right? And therefore, this is displayed that way. I can also take that off and just look at my main columns that I want to see. Additionally, the batch status view, batch summary view will display this test result status data in this out-of-box report. So if I'm a product owner and I want to see how my last test suite did, if I'm running, let's say nightly, I can come in and look at the percentage of passing tests automatically. And this passing test percentage can go up and down based on the number of unresolved tests we maintain, right, or we take action on. So this, you can see here, I have a lot of unresolved tests in this status, in this batch that I need to go and take action on, determine if it's a acceptable or unacceptable change in those tests. And there's again, showing the little out-of-the-box functionality here. Sort of operated by operating OS, device, test status by all these different metrics here, if this is important to your team. This is also shown, again, at the test level, but as you saw, we have multiple steps in each test. I think all these are, you can see some tests have 3 steps, some have 2, some I think even have 1 in this one example. If I just want to see all the steps associated to this batch, I can click this view here by batch steps view and see the steps one by one. And this is actually really important because this is also plays into the functionality of the AI auto maintenance. And I'm going to actually go to a better example to show you this, because I think this can save a lot of time for a lot of teams. We're going to take this one example where you can see on the top here, we have 19 tests overall. And out of these 19 tests, there's 76 steps. So they're all multi-step tests. And please ignore that they've already been saved, pass, or fail. Let's pretend they're all unresolved. And let's pretend the scenario we ran this as a nightly suite. We come in the next day and they're all unresolved, meaning, hey, I need to take action on 76 steps. And if I go to this view and just click one by one on the little radar button to show the differences, if I did this 76 times, that would take me over an hour, right? Even if I just took a minute per step. Obviously not ideal. So if I made a change overnight in my test suite, or ran a regression suite overnight that, hey, we expected a new feature to be implemented on our header, and therefore we need to change the baseline to that acceptable or that new feature acceptance state, right? I can go ahead and use the Applitools dashboard AI capability here, group steps by similar differences. So clicking this button, what Applitools is attempting to do at the batch level, the batch is basically the highest hierarchy you can get to group tests together by similar page, right? Either you have tests run in different environments or similar test names, right, across the whole site that you can group together. And therefore, what Applitools just did out of the 76 steps made 2 different distinct groups sorted by unique difference. So it's saying 40 steps out of this batch all had the same unique difference. And I'm looking at the step view here, and I can look at that unique difference and say, okay, hey, my GitHub logo fell off the page, and therefore this is not what I expected. I can reject this just one time. I can click that, and therefore I just updated 40 steps all at one time. I don't need to click it 40 times. I just updated all those tests. I can also look at that group view and look at what steps were affected, or the test view itself. Similarly, I can go to this next group of 36 and say, okay, this was my acceptable change that we expected GitHub's logo to change colors. And I can accept this. And therefore, I updated 36 of those steps correctly because they were correct in my feature implementation. And therefore, I just updated 76 steps in a couple seconds. And of course, let us know if you have questions in the chat about that functionality. It is very powerful, the AI auto maintenance. And we have another example of that here in a couple minutes. Okay, we're going to move into how to manage test results most effectively now. And I'm going to show you a good example of a match level explanation. Give me 1 sec to navigate there. We're going to go to here, this one test. Oh, turn the pink back on. So we're going to open up step 2 of this McDonald's test result. And we see here that by default, we have different levels of different lenses of how we can use the AI comparison to meet our needs. based on the result. And we can also preview what we call, again, the lens, we call it a match level. And in this view, we can, again, everything we're showing today is post-execution. You can define what match level you want to execute the test on. Our default view, our default match level, if you don't previously define it as part of your Applitools test, it will default to strict. And as I roll over here on this drop down, it says strict. It gives you a brief definition of what it is. It says detecting differences that are visible to the human eye. This is why it's our default, because it is our default visual AI technology. It is looking at this before and after comparison at the same lens as a human eye and brain. So it is not doing a pixel to pixel comparison or DOM comparison. And why that's very important, and I'll show you in this example why it's more accurate to do strict testing for regression testing purposes, is because it is calling out every single difference, but the ones that ultimately matter, and not to the rendering differences that you would, an end user would never see, right? Ultimately, until they're like 300% magnified on the page, where pixels, shift between browsers or browser version upgrades. Ultimately, that adds more noise, those pixel to pixel solutions that our competitors in the open source space and commercial space offer, right? Where it's very difficult to scale those pixel to pixel solutions, especially if you're doing responsive size testing and cross browser testing, because as you know, browsers render pixels independently from each other. So we developed, as our CTO, who is our founder of our company or co-founder of our company, developed these algorithms, these AI algorithms, to replicate the human eye and brain. So that is why it's our default and why we recommend using strict as much as possible for regression testing. We're going to go through 3 examples. We'll also show we do have pixel to pixel capability. It's called our exact mode. And I'm going to show why this is not efficient and really should only be used in cases of design comparison, right? If I wanted to just specifically look at design Figma, let's say Figma to implementation, I need to be pixel perfect. We can have that capability, but it's really not built for scale. And this is a good example why so. We're going to turn exact mode on here. And it's a very simple page, as you can see. We're going to zoom in here briefly. But you can see exact mode is now highlighting everything on this map view, right? And if I zoom in one more time, you can see that if I toggle back and forth, the map is dynamically changing, but not all aspects of the map are changing. And that's why strict is not highlighting every single pixel change in that map, right? It's only highlighting actually the changes of that map. So you can see the missing portion up here. If I turn the pink off, you see the Lakeland Park, Sleepy Hollow. Strict is capturing all of that, but it's not capturing just the gray, right? Or the Google logo. That's just one example of why pixel to pixel does not work at scale. We have other examples we'll show you here in a couple minutes, but also a really good example for our next algorithm called layout. And we're going to turn layout on. And layout, as you can see as I roll over it, it says detect differences in the page structure. So what layout does, as we turn it on, it's now measuring the whole image, and the image we captured is a full page image, right, of McDonald's map page. It's just determining if there are any missing elements or page structure element breaks. As you can see, it's now not highlighting anything because the structure of the elements on the page are correct. There's no differences. So this is really great for dynamic content testing. And we'll go into an example of a better example of dynamic content. But you can also mix and match these levels. So if I were doing a regression test, I would want to test in strict And then to note this, maybe this whole section, as I consider it dynamic, we can draw a region of, hey, I want to test this region in a different match level. I want to test it in layout only. And I'll show an example of that. Okay. Additionally, what I was showing here, I meant to call out keyboard shortcuts. This is, I think, really great for users who already use Applitools, but maybe are not familiar with this. In this section, we'll actually back out to the whole test results dashboard. We have a Learning Center button. If we click this, you have at your fingertips easy ways to go to documentation or getting started videos, or just learn what's new. You click the what's new, it pulls up automatically release notes of the last or the latest version you're on, 10.19. We expect Eyes 10.20 to be released very soon. So you'll see new updates there. But also, keyboard shortcuts is very important. If you're a keyboard person like myself, there's a whole list of keyboard shortcuts you can do in the UI instead of just clicking each button. There's a lot, as you can see. I'm going to show you 3 easy keyboard shortcuts right now that I use every day and just makes my life so much easier looking at test results. So pulling up by default, your baseline to checkpoint are going to be side by side. As you can see, I have differences I need to now determine what's, if they're accurate, if they're, meaningful or not. And I can use the highlight diff buttons to just look at those differences, but then the before and after arrows to zoom in on each difference. And obviously we have a dynamic content piece here. By pressing the T key, T as in Tom on my keyboard, I can toggle back and forth that change. I'm going to zoom out so you can see this a little better. So I'm going between the baseline and checkpoint and just toggling this back and forth. So I feel this is a little easier to look at differences versus just side by side. And I went back to this side by side view just by pressing S on my keyboard. S as in Sam. And if I want to turn off the pink to see this better, I can press D as in dog. Therefore, I can toggle, see this without the pink. I can turn the pink back on, and I can go back side by side view. I think a lot of my customers who I work with aren't aware of this functionality, and it's a lifesaver. It turns minutes into seconds instead of using this functionality here, where I can do the same thing, but then I'm clicking each and every action, right? So toggling, super important, very helpful. Okay. Want to also show you a better layout region example. I'm going to go to example here of why the layout algorithm is very widely used. As I was mentioning, the match levels, our 2 most popular match levels are strict and layout. Exact mode, as I mentioned, helpful in very specific scenarios, but not meant to be used at scale. Ignore colors is essentially the strict algorithm, but doesn't call out differences of color. So if you're doing contrast testing or accessibility testing, this could be used, but it's not widely used. Strict and layout are the most heavily used. So back to my example as, hey, we have a highly dynamic app here, mobile app of Yahoo Finance. And you might have seen this example before if you've seen any of our videos, but this is very important to call out of why it's very powerful, the layout match level here. So we have a lot of dynamic content. You can see, if I zoom in here, stock tickers, labels, numbers, all different, each page load of our mobile app. But if I wanted to test for structure differences, if I can't control my data in my automation testing, this is super helpful. Why we can handle dynamic content. This whole section I'm going to define real quick as dynamic using the layout region. And you can see here what layout's going to do is now determined that, hey, there's no structural difference. I'm going to click out of that so you can see this a little better, that the stop indexes are changing data, names, everything, but that's all fine because it's structurally fine, right? The page doesn't break structure, but hey, there's still a difference detected in this region I just created, where in this checkpoint in my new test, my test execution, it's missing altogether. You can see this a little better, where that 2426 is now missing altogether. So therefore, layout's calling this as a break in the page, right? And this is important to call out. And maybe even to a functional test, even if you were to assert this number percentage as part of your Selenium test or your Cypress test or Playwright, hypothetically saying, let's say the developer changed that white font into the green background accidentally, right? The HTML could still be there, right? So that functional assertion could technically still pass. Visually, it's broken to the end user. So that's why it's very important to add these visual assertions to functional testing, because it captures these scenarios that happen, right? There's visual rendering bugs all the time in production. So this is why it's very important to have this sort of testing. Also, very important to call out why we're doing layout instead of ignore. We have ignore regions, and if I were to change this to ignore, I think this is usually the default for a lot of users that want to just ignore content for dynamic purposes. I don't want to be aware of dynamic changes. As you can see, we can ignore, but I think this personally goes against QA best practice, right? If we're ignoring sections of the page, hypothetically, if there's a defect under the region that I ignored, I'm not going to be aware of it, right? Applitools is not going to call it out to me. So we want to be very, very lenient of when we use ignore. We want to use layout as much as possible for dynamic content testing, as it does a really great job, number one. But it's also going to give you some testing of structure. You would want to be aware if this was missing, or if this turned into 2 line breaks instead of 1, right? So that's why layout is very widely used for dynamic content. And we're going to go into, quickly, we're going to do a couple minutes of how this Applitools dashboard acts as a collaboration center and reduces, ultimately, feedback loops between either QA dev, or if you're an SDET and you're responsible for execution and maintenance of your test, how you can find more information very, very quickly. So reducing the defect loop altogether. I want to show you real quick, when we have a lot of differences, there's a feature on Applitools that's super helpful called Ignore Displacement. So we're going to pull up this full page example where if I toggle back and forth, we can briefly see that something has changed that's shifted the page, and therefore in strict mode, everything is shifted. Therefore, we have a lot of pink to go through. We have a lot of differences. We have another lens called Hide Differences Caused by Element Displacement that I'll turn on, and you can do this either the UI or programmatically as part of your execution result. It's meant to actually designed to be as part of a triage of looking at this at the UI layer. We can add it programmatically, but it does slow down performance of the Applitools test. So we want to be very lenient when we use this as part of our execution strategy. Turning this on in the dashboard, take a second. It's looking at a lot of differences. This will basically determine what exact elements changed and caused the page to, all elements in the page to shift. So here we go. We just saw that this algorithm just accurately shows that, hey, we had a content change in this title page here. right? Question mark to S to question mark, and this word was not in the previous version. This window we can maybe add an ignore or layout. We want, if it's an ad, let's say, a lot of images, but also in the footer, we saw that there's a position change on the elements. And if I toggle back and forth, you could see that position change very easily. There's examples where I've seen in footers of websites where there's one little change, let's say a link to the company section, and that changed the whole shift of the page. This is a really great lifesaver for shifting and a lot of differencing, right? Very, very helpful, that ignore displacement. But high differences by element displacement. It is a little bit of a mouthful, but we just call it ignore displacements for short. Additionally, reducing the defect loop, we have a root cause analysis tool. And I'm not sure if everyone has seen this, but if you haven't, this is very, very helpful to determine what caused the difference, right? Applitools, as you can see, does a fantastic job of calling out differences. And we can see here that we have a color change. As part of the screenshot capture that Applitools is doing as part of your functional test, by default, it is capturing the DOM rule and CSS, the HTML capture of the image as well. So using this root cause analysis tool here, we can pull this open in this side view, root cause analysis, and click the difference. And therefore, automatically, Applitools will do a before and after comparison of the DOM and CSS ruling and show you that, right? So this is really great if you're a QA engineer and you've determined this is a defect, right? Why did this change color? I can add this information right here, a link to this ticket. I can open up a Jira or a Rally ticket right from this view. If you're using one of those bug defects systems, I can create a region and say, hey, bug found. I can create, again, a Jira instance right from this view. I can link that root cause analysis information right to this ticket. So it basically becomes like a little history. And I can also tag. I can tag my developer directly. I'm the only one in my dashboard, so I can tag myself. Please take a look at this. And they'll get an automated an email notification automatically. You can also post this to Slack or Microsoft Teams if you work in a channel environment like that, just as a way to decrease feedback loops. So the developer can come in, log in, and see this information directly of what exactly changed. This is super helpful for cross-browser and response sizes, right? As most often developers are not testing at that level. They're testing just Chrome. They're testing one environment. And in our full regression suites, we're testing more than one environment most of the time. Okay. And Pam, do we have 5 minutes left?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. I just want to go now into how to find specific data or tests that need the most attention in different dashboards. We've done a lot of work of how to use the test results dashboard. Again, as I mentioned, this is the most heavily used portion of Applitools Eyes, but there are other dashboards here that have a lot of helpful information. I'm actually going to switch tabs. Give me this instead. I'm going to go into a more built-out demo example. But I want to show you the test requiring attention dashboard. This is something that we've added in 2 versions ago. So something that's still fairly new to Applitools. Again, all the information you're sending Applitools is displayed here in the test results dashboard as a lazy load. But sometimes that's very difficult to find what exactly you're looking for or something that needs the most attention. Again, just want to focus on the unresolved tests, and we want to focus on maintaining those or approving or rejecting those differences. Applitools has this test requiring attention dashboard. If you've never seen this, we can go in here and we can look at different date ranges. This is going to default the last 7 days. Let's go to the last 30. And we can look at by application name if we want to, or all applications. We can also look at different branches. I think I have all just default branch here. And this will just display to me the tests that need the attention, unresolved steps or new steps that you just need to be aware of. So therefore, or steps that test that maybe you had a 6-step test, now that it's 5 steps long, and the last baseline fell off there. It needs just a look over. So this is just an easy way to basically filter out the tests that don't need attention, which means passing, right? And just focus on the ones that do. So you can go down this list and resolve that way. So it's a very helpful dashboard. If you haven't looked at this or given it a try, let us know your feedback. It's very, very effective. Additionally, the Insights dashboard, we're going to go here. And all the data feeding Applitools is in all these dashboards. But this, as an out-of-the-box report, is very, very helpful. And I can see my execution history based on date range, last 30 days. I could see the test result status percentage. By that level, I could see how many tests I've run over time, how many issue regions I've opened, and also the status by device, browser, OS, out of the box, right? And I can send this to anyone. I can send this as a PDF. I can export this link to anyone that needs to be aware of my regression suite history. Additionally, this is very helpful to show what tests need most attention. As you can see here, I have a button here called Test a Low Pass Rate, and I can pull up in the last 30 days, ranked by highest number of executions and the lowest pass rate. So I can click, hey, this simulated differences test ran 64 times and only passed 54% of the time. I expect it to be, I didn't expect differences. I expect to be, very high. Why is it failing 46% of the time? I can click that, and it's going to pull up the execution history of that test in each batch, right? But we're looking at just the simulated differences test. And this is basically scrolling to show you how many different times I've run this test across different environments, right? When the last changes I've made, if it's looks like it's passing days ago now. But if I had just unresolved tests, I can look at that and click that and go right to that test result. So as a low-hanging fruit way to focus on tests that need the most attention, this is a very easy way to do that in the Insights dashboard. Additionally, I can look at all the results, and we'll after this example, we'll stop for questions. All my information, all my data, it can be organized by apps and test view. So you can see here, I can search for my McDonald's app. I can spell McDonald's. I go to Prod 12. That's the app I most recently run, and I can look at the tests associated to that app and sort by last test run, last baseline saved. Additionally, we're going to look at meant to go that way. The simulated differences test, the one we just looked at. I can click these 3 dots here and show my last test runs, which will bring me to the same page we were just looking at, or show the baselines associated to that test. And you can see here, I've run it across multiple environments. So you can see all the environment baselines I've created over time, how many test runs, and I can also show the history of that baseline too. So I want to see my history of how this test over time on my Safari desktop view has looked. And I've only run it, I've run it twice. I've only made 1 change to it, but I can see that history. If I've made multiple changes, multiple saves, all this history can be recorded to me. And I can also look at that over time. So this is really great for product teams that want to see, hey, how did my page look 3 months ago? And we've made infinite number of changes since then. I can look at how that page looked over time.
Again, thank you, EJ, for a great demonstration. We do have a few questions that have come up. Vimy asked if there was a way to filter out test failures for a specific reason.
Yes, you can filter anything you want. You can use the filter capability to filter missing steps. I believe there also is a way to do that in the execution itself. I'll have to circle back on that, Vimy. We'll circle back with you if that can be part of the execution history. But as the post-execution look in the dashboard, yes, you can filter out missing steps.
Okay.
And you can also automatically fail tests as well, if you would like.
Earlier in the session, Madavi had asked about mobile testing, if we could do mobile testing with Applitools.
100%, yes. Applitools can be used, I like to say, on any application that you can take an image of, Applitools can test it. So, the most popular apps are, of course, for web and mobile web and native, desktop, PDFs, you name it. I mean, we've worked on use cases where we, not going to say the company name, but we worked on scanning DICOM images. If you're not familiar, that's brain scans. We've helped, brain scan companies diagnose differences in brain scanning. So it's really flexible to test any sort of application type, because at the end of the day, Applitools is consuming an image file. So every asset's an image, and we can do a lot with that image file.
Excellent, excellent. All right, while we're seeing if there's anyone who else has any additional questions, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the first in our Applitools in Action series, which we are hoping to be kind of a how-to session. If you've not already answered the poll on what other topics you'd like to see, please take a minute to do that now. And if there are topics that you would like to see that aren't here, be sure to add those in the chat so that we can gather those. Okay. All right. I don't see any other questions right now, but I do hope that you found today's session insightful. There's a lot more to uncover. Our next session is all about dynamic content. Talia will be leading that on September 5th, test automation for dynamic content. If you've not signed up for that, you can do that by clicking the link in the little banner below, or by visiting the resources tab. All right, there's one other question about limitation on capturing the whole page screenshot in Android or iPhone.
Limitation. So it depends on. So by default, the short answer is no. There's not a limitation. If it's a scrolling page, which, working in native, there is scrolling, of course. Applitools by default will try to stitch those steps together in a full stitch mode. Depends what ultimately we want to capture, right? Especially in mobile environments, it is tricky versus web specifically. So you can either specify, hey, I just want to capture above the scroll or full scroll. So you have that capability option as part of the Applitools SDK in the execution. You can define that. So yeah, we've worked at scale with other mobile, with a lot of customers that do mobile testing, and yeah, all the capabilities are open to what you want to capture ultimately.
As a pioneer and leader in AI-powered automated testing, Applitools aims to make intelligent solutions accessible to all and to deliver unparalleled business value for our customers. If you're already using Applitools, reach out to your account team to learn more about how you can better take advantage of the tools and strategies outlined today. And if you're not an Applitools customer, you could see firsthand with a free trial. You can try Applitools Eyes. You can or you can try our newest product, Applitools Autonomous, with a free trial. Either way, you'll get a good glimpse of what it means to add AI to every stage of your testing. Again, thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.